Hello and welcome everyone. Um, in our present class, we'll be talking about Immanuel Kant. Let's move on with his introduction. So, Immanuel Kant, he was born in 1724 and he was dead by 1804, and he is the central figure in modern philosophy. Now, we have to understand what is meant by modern philosophy, because modern philosophy, it has its foundation strongly built by this man Immanuel Kant. He synthesized early modern rationalism and empiricism. I would like you people to move on and search for rationalism and empiricism, since they are two major movements in philosophy. So I'd like you people to go on and search out for these terms by yourself, because they take lots of time over here if I go for their explanation. So he synthesized, by synthesized we mean to say he made harmony between rationalism and empiricism, and then he set the terms for much of the 19th and 20th century philosophy, and he continues to exercise a significant influence today in metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, political philosophy, aesthetics, and other fields. Now these are the different fields where this man Immanuel Kant, he has worked, and where he is best known. The fundamental idea of Kant's critical philosophy. Now there are two or three major portions of his philosophy. One is critical philosophy, the other one is theoretical philosophy, then he has got moral philosophy as well. Right now we are talking about his critical philosophy. So the fundamental idea of Kant's critical philosophy, especially in his three critiques. By critiques we mean to say he has come up with criticism in his three different projects. The first one, the critique of pure reason, that was published in 1781. Then the critique of practical reason, which was published in 1787, and then the critique of power of judgment, which was published in 1788. And then he talked about human autonomy. By human autonomy we mean to say human freedom, which was published in 1790. Of all these critiques, there is one thing which is commonly taken to be the collective theme of Immanuel Kant's works, and that theme is the autonomy or the freedom of human being. He talks about the freedom and autonomy of human beings in all these works in one way or the other. Now he argues that human understanding is the source of the general laws of nature that structure all our experience, and that human reason gives itself a moral law. Now this needs a bit of explanation, so let us move on. He says that human understanding is the source of the general laws of nature. Now human understanding in itself has given shape to the general laws of nature. He says natural laws in itself, they were nothing. Now this human understanding, this human faculty of understanding, they have given shape to those natural laws because of the experience of the human beings. And then he says that human reason gives itself the moral law. Now he believes that there is no transcendental moral law. By transcendental moral law we mean to say that this moral law hasn't been sent to the human beings from the heavens or from the skies or from any other external force. He says that human reason, human mind, human faculty of understanding and thinking has given itself this moral law, which is our basis for belief in God. And just because we have understood and we have produced this moral law, this makes a way for us to believe in God, and then to believe in freedom, and then to believe in immortality. In all these things, immortality, freedom, believe in God, of all these things, it is basically linked and associated with moral law, and that moral law, he says, is basically incarnated. It has been deeply rooted in the understanding of human beings, or in the mind of the human beings. Okay, therefore, scientific knowledge, morality, and religious belief are mutually consistent and secure because they all rest on the same foundation of human autonomy. Now, for Kant, scientific knowledge, whatever kind of a scientific knowledge there be, and then morality, and then religious beliefs, or all of them, they are mutually consistent and secure. They are all rooted within each other, because they have the same foundation, and their same foundation is once again human autonomy, that is human freedom. Okay, which is also the final end of nature, according to the teleological worldview of reflecting judgment, that Kant introduces to unify the theoretical and practical parts of his philosophical systems. So we have talked about Kant different critiques, and then we have talked about Kant practical. I made a reference to Kant's practical philosophy, then theoretical philosophy, then his critical and moral philosophy. So all these chunks and parts, they come together in one thing, and that one thing is human freedom. He says that the entire purpose of this universe, the entire purpose of this nature itself, is to secure the freedom of human beings. He says this human freedom, this human autonomy, it is present within this nature itself, the nature which has been given meaning and shaped by the reasoning and understanding of human beings. Now, coming towards our second slide, which has its title as Morality and Freedom. Now keep one thing in mind, Kant was such a diverse and such a mammoth writer and author that he has covered almost the entire sphere of human life. Now we be only focusing on his morality and freedom. That is basically a part of one of his critiques. Just because of the nature of our class and your level of understanding, we are not going to move forward then they. So Kant's positive project in theoretical philosophy range from the critique of pure reason, transcendental idealism, and the transcendental deduction to his practical philosophy. Now all these things, they have been covered by this man. Let us now talk about his critique of practical reason. Since Kant's philosophy is deeply systematic, this section begins with a preliminary look at how his theoretical and practical philosophy fit together. Now we'll be taking a cursory look at his practical philosophy and theoretical philosophy, and we'll be studying how do they fit together. Yes, Kant has written on diverse topics, keeping in view the needs and requirements. We'll only talk about his morality and freedom. This is one small subtopic within the majorly associated major topics of Kant. So that is what we have to keep in focus. Now coming towards Kant's theoretical and practical autonomy. The fundamental idea of Kant's philosophy is human autonomy. We have already talked about it. This is the most important thing Kant is focused on. So far we have seen this in Kant's constructivist view of experience. Now constructivist view of experience is something that he's talked about in the rest of his critiques and in projects. I have just made a reference to that. According to which our understanding is the source of the general laws of nature. From where do the general laws of nature come? It is just the outcome of our understanding, or of mind and mentality. Autonomy or freedom literally means giving the law to oneself, and on Kant's view, our understanding provides laws that constitute the a priori framework of our experience. There are two kinds of knowledge according to Kant. One is a priori knowledge. A priori knowledge is the knowledge that is not based on human experience, that is independent of human experience. And then there is posteriori knowledge, which is the outcome of human experience. So for him, autonomy is the outcome of a priori knowledge. A priori knowledge may be transcendental knowledge or natural knowledge that has no influence from the social and behavioral experiences of human beings. Our understanding does not provide the matter or content of our experience. Now mind, understanding simply means mind, does not provide the matter or content of our experience. Experience and understanding for Kant, they are two different things. And over here, by this experience, he means the sensory experience or the social experience or the worldly experience. Okay, but it does provide the basic formal structure within which we experience any matter received through our senses. He says that the experience that we get in the world, the social and behavioral experience, it does not provide content or matter to a priori knowledge or transcendental knowledge. Rather, it gives shape or just the procedure of that experience to our transcendental or our external knowledge, a priori knowledge. Okay. Kant's central argument for this view is the transcendental deduction, according to which it is a condition of self-consciousness that our understanding constructs experience in this way. Now, two things over here in the slide are very, very important. One is autonomy, focus on their theme, and the second one is this theme of self-consciousness. For Kant, self-consciousness means freedom, autonomy. Okay, and that self-consciousness for Kant, it comes from transcendental or from external sources, cognitive sources, inborn sources, not the social and behavioral sources. So we may call self-consciousness the highest principle of Kant's theoretical philosophy, since it is at least the basis for all our a priori knowledge about the structure of nature. So we may call self-consciousness the highest principle of Kant's theoretical philosophy. Now, in Kant's theoretical philosophy, this self-consciousness is the highest principle because this provides basis to our a priori knowledge, and it tells us about the structure of nature. And since I have already told you that nature, according to Kant, is an element that strives for the freedom of human beings, so nature over here has been used in the sense of autonomy or freedom. Keep that in mind. Okay, so Kant's moral philosophy is also based on the idea of autonomy. We have talked about his theoretical philosophy, and previously we have talked about the connection between his theoretical philosophy and moral philosophy and how do they fit together. So there is this one common theme between his theoretical philosophy and moral philosophy, and that theme is of autonomy and of freedom. He thinks that there is a single fundamental principle of morality on which all specific moral duties are based. According to him, there is one fundamental principle of morality, and out of that one fundamental principle, the rest of those moral duties, they come out. The moral law is a product of reason. From where does this moral law come? According to Kant, it comes out of reason. For Kant, while the basic laws of nature are products of our understanding. Now, moral law is the product of reason. Reason, the faculty of human mind, the quality of human mind. And then for Kant, while the basic laws of nature, one is moral law, the other one is the law of nature. Both of them, they come out of the human mind, but one comes out of reason, and then the other one, it comes out of present understanding. We have given shape to those basic laws of nature, and then we have made moral law out of our reason. Okay, now there are important differences between the senses in which we are autonomous or free in constructing our experience and in morality. Now, one is constructing your experience, and the other one is morality. For example, Kant regards understanding and reason as different cognitive faculties, although he sometimes uses reason in a wide sense to cover both these things. The categories and therefore the laws of nature are dependent on our specifically human forms of intuition, while reason is not. Okay, now over here he has clarified the difference between reason and understanding. The categories and therefore the laws of nature are dependent on our specifically human forms of intuition. Intuition, commonly to which you refer as your sixth sense, while reason is not. Reason is something very, very practical, and understanding, which has given us the moral laws that can have intuition or the sixth sense, while reason, it is practical, it does not include this intuition. Okay, the moral law does not depend on any qualities that are peculiar to human nature, but only on the nature of reason as such. Now, the moral law does not depend on any qualities that are peculiar or particular to human nature, but only on the nature of reason as such. Moral law, it comes out of human reason. I've already told you this thing. Although its manifestation to us is a categorical imperative,
reflects the fact that the human will is not necessarily determined by pure reason, but is also influenced by other incentives rooted in our needs and inclinations, and our specific duties deriving from the categorical imperative do reflect human nature and the contingencies of human life. Now, this is a bit technical. Keep focused. This reason, which we have called something very very practical, it cannot be altogether taken out of this intuition. Many critics who have had their criticism on Kant, they believe that they believe that reason, it cannot be totally or outrightly practical. It can have inclinations and incentives from your sixth sense, from your common sense. Therefore, this is something very very debatable. Despite these differences, however, Kant holds that we give the moral law to ourselves. Despite these differences, despite these controversies, Kant believes that we give the moral law to ourselves, just as we also give the general laws of nature to ourselves. Now, for Kant, this is very very interesting. He says that there is no laws of nature. There are no laws of nature first, then there is no moral law. If both of them they have been given by human beings to themselves, that means that both of them they are man-made and they are not natural, they are not transcendental. This is the basic point that you need to keep in mind, though in a different sense. Moreover, we each necessarily give the same moral law to ourselves, just as we each construct our experience in accordance with the same categories. Now, we might have talked about it in our classes as well. Something right for me may be not right for you. Something wrong for me may be not wrong for you. This is exactly the theme of or the outcome of this entire slide. This man, Kant, he believes that we individually construct the moral law or the laws of nature in accordance to our experience. Now, whatever way I experience something good, I call it good. Whatever way I experience something bad, I call it bad. But my good and bad may not be necessarily good or bad for any other person. Now, to summarize, theoretical philosophy of Kant is about how the world is. Keep this one line in your mind, and I believe the rest of it would get clear. Theoretical philosophy is about how the world is. That means it deals with the present. Its highest principle is self-consciousness. Keep this one thing more in your minds too. Its highest principle is self-consciousness, on which our knowledge of the basic laws of nature is based. Our knowledge of the basic laws of nature, it is the outcome of self-consciousness. And later on he calls this self-consciousness as a common sense too. Given sensory data, by sensory data we mean to say the data that we collect through our senses, our understanding constructs, our understanding makes experience according to these a priori laws. His practical philosophy, on the other hand, is about how the world ought to be, how the world could have been, or how the world can be, or how the world might have been. He over here talks about the possibility. Okay, its highest principle is the moral law, from which we derive duties that command or that order how we are to act in a specific situation, or how we ought to act in specific situations. Depends on contexts. Okay, this moral law, it tells us how to behave and react in specific situations. Okay, and this thing has been covered in his practical philosophy. Kant also claims that reflection on our moral duties and our need for happiness leads to the thought of an ideal world, which he calls the highest good. Now, human autonomy and reaching to the highest good for human beings, both of them, they are the reoccurring themes and thoughts within this man Kant. His entire philosophy circles around it revolves around the highest good for human beings, and then his autonomy for human beings, or freedom for human beings. So Kant also claims that reflection, thinking on our moral duties, feeling our moral duties and our need for happiness leads to the thought of an ideal world. He says that the ideal world, it may only be possible when we have this self-consciousness, when we can reflect on our moral duties, and he believes that human beings, they have this prowess and power of making this world an ideal place to live. Okay, given how the world is, his theoretical philosophy, and how it ought to be his practical philosophy, we aim to make the world better by constructing or realizing the highest good. Now what is the highest good? We have talked about his man-made laws, his man-made reason in the previous slide, and he believes that the highest good in the world, to make the world peaceful, to make the world beautiful, both these things, they can be possible because of human efforts. Now, continuing on the same thought, let's get to our next slide. So both parts of Kant's philosophy are about autonomously constructing a world, autonomously, freely making a world, but in different senses, but with different meanings, with different purposes. In theoretical philosophy, we use our categories and forms of intuition to construct a world of experience or nature. Now, in theoretical philosophy of Kant, we use our categories and forms of intuition, which I have told you, we refer to it by our sixth sense at times, to construct a world of experience or nature. But what kind of experience? We have talked about it. A priori knowledge, based on a priori knowledge, which is not based on social and behavioral experience. In his practical philosophy, we use the moral law to construct the idea of a moral world, or a realm of ends that guides our conduct. Now, how does he reach to the highest good? He says in his practical philosophy, we use the moral law to construct, to make the idea of a moral world. We use the moral law to construct the idea of a moral world, not the real moral world, but the idea of a moral world, or a realm of ends that guide our conduct. Now, it is this moral law, he believes, that guides our conduct, and since he believes that moral law, from individual to individual, it changes, and it is man-made, we have to reflect our own conduct by ourselves. And he believes that ultimately, to transform the natural world, to change the natural world into the highest good, on the basis of self-reflection of our conduct and behavior. Now, finally, transcendental idealism is the framework within which these two parts of Kant's philosophy fit together. If you find time, please read his transcendental idealism, because that is where he believes, and in fact we all believe, that these two philosophies of Kant, they fit together. Theoretical philosophy deals with appearances, to which our knowledge is strictly limited, and practical philosophy deals with things in themselves. Now, theoretical philosophy deals with appearances, to which our knowledge is strictly bound, limited, and then practical philosophy deals with things in themselves. Practical philosophy deals with the things the way they are, although practical philosophy does not give us knowledge about things in themselves, but only provides rational justification for certain beliefs about them for practical purposes. Now, practical philosophy, it does not provide us or give us rational justifications for certain beliefs. Now belief is something very, very controversial once again, and I understand it's a bit tricky, but go through it if you can. But only provides rational justification for certain beliefs about them for practical purposes. Now, for reason and for practical purposes, this practical philosophy, it digs deeper into the things themselves and try to find out and collect meanings on the basis of reason. Now, since this is a part of empiricism, and when we dig deeper into things, the things, they get shallower, they get emptier time and again. So this can be taken as something very, very ironical, something very, very controversial. Now, building on the same idea, what is freedom according to Kant? Once again, the most important belief about things in themselves. Now, when we dig deeper into things in themselves, Kant believes that this process is important because it concerns human freedom. The most important belief about things in themselves that Kant thinks only practical philosophy can justify concerns human freedom. It concerns human freedom. That is why we need to dig deeper into things. Freedom is important. Kant believes freedom is important because, in Kant's view, moral appraisal, moral duties presupposes it needs to have that we are free. It needs to have us free in the sense that we have the ability to do otherwise. Now, this moral appraisal or moral duties or moral laws, they need us to be free, since we are free. By free, we have two choices. We can either do good or can do otherwise. That means we can do bad too. To see why, consider Kant's example of a man who commits a theft. Kant thinks that in order for this man's action to be morally wrong, it must have been within his control, in the sense that it was within his power at the time not to have committed the theft. Now this is very, very important. Please stay focused. If this was not within his control at the time, then while it may be useful to punish him in order to shape his behavior or to influence others, it nevertheless would not be correct to say that his action was morally wrong. Moral rightness and wrongness apply only to free agents who control their actions and have it in their power at the time of their actions either to act rightly or not. According to Kant, this is just common sense. Now, this moral appraisal, it has this sense of freedom associated to it. Kant believes that if that person wasn't free, if that person was distant, or if that person was decided to be committing that theft, then there is no reason for giving him punishment. Now, Kant believes that human beings need to be free. If this person who has committed the theft, if he wasn't free to decide whether to commit the theft or not, if he wasn't free, that means that someone else or something else from the external world is responsible for his theft and not the person himself is responsible. So there is no need of giving him punishment. He says that to decide morally wrong and right things, the first prerequisite thing is to make human beings free. Since human beings, when they are free, they can better decide about good and bad things. This is the entire concept over here. The last part of this slide, moral rightness and wrongness apply only to free agents, Now this is the reoccurring thought over here, so keep this in mind. Moral rightness and wrongness apply only to free agents, those people, those human beings who are free, who control their actions and have it in their power at the time of their actions, either to act rightly or not. According to Kant, this is just common sense. Now, this common sense, you might have heard it, that common sense is a sense that is not common in common people, and it has come out of Kant's philosophy as well. Now, this thing needs to be practiced. People, they need to be free. People, they need to have this common sense first. If they do not have this common sense, if they do not have this knowledge, if they do not have this awareness, and after that, if they commit any kind of a mistake, any kind of a crime, they should not be held responsible in Kant's view, since they were not free. They were sent to have committed the theft or to have committed something wrong by someone else from the external world. So why to hold them responsible? Rather hold the authority responsible who have not led those people to be free. Now over here in the next slide, the same theme of compatibilism, it has been compatibilism, that he calls the comparative concept of freedom. Now the freedom and its concept, it is comparative, and it is associated with Leibniz, who was the predecessor of Kant. Note one thing, that Kant has a specific type of compatibilism in mind, which I'll refer to simply as compatibilism. Compatibilism is a word that's been taken from compatible. Although there may be other types of compatibilism, they do not fit Kant's characterization of that view, and the compatibilitist view, as Kant understands it, I am free. Now this is what he means by compatibilism. I am free whenever the cause of my action is within me. Now when the cause or the reason of the action is within me, when the control is with me, I am compatible. I can better rule myself, I can better control myself, I can reflect on my own actions and thoughts. So I am unfree only when something external to me pushes or moves me. Human beings, they claim, according to Kant, that they are unfree when something external pushes them or moves them to do something. But I am free whenever the proximate means close cause of my body's movement is internal to me as an acting being. Now this acting being is what is the concern of Kant. Now this acting being, Kant believes, if it's been reflected and controlled by human beings themselves, they can better rule themselves and this world can be a better place. But since there are different kind of actions about which he talks in the later lines, this idea is once again controversial. If we distinguish between involuntary convulsions, involuntary bodily movements, then on this view, free actions are just voluntary bodily movements. Kant ridicules. Now one is voluntary body movement, the other one is involuntary body movement. At times you commit something wrong, though you did not mean to commit that, but since the control is with someone or something external, you have to commit that. And that is what Kant is trying to make fun of or to ridicule. So Kant ridicules this view as a rigid subterfuge that tries to solve an ancient philosophical problem with a little quibbling about words. Now he calls it a rigid subterfuge. There is something very, very meaningless, something very, very stupid. Okay, this view, he says, assimilates human freedom to the freedom of a turnspit. Now he makes fun of it and he calls it with derogatory names. He says this freedom is just a mere copy of freedom. This human freedom is a mere copy of human freedom. You are not free. Now at times you might have experienced this thing that you do not mean to do something wrong, but then it happens, and since it happens, we try to relive with this hope and with this statement that it had to happen. Even if you didn't want, it had to happen this way. So Kant is basically making fun of this concept of freedom, that whether human beings, whether they are totally free or not. If they are not free, so how can they be called free? Or how can they achieve this freedom? If they have this freedom, then why are they committing these crimes, these mistakes, time and again? So this idea for him is very, very controversial, and that is what he puts his share about discussing it and reopening this concept. Okay, so this view, he says, assimilates human freedom to the freedom of a turnspit or a projectile in flight or the motion of a clerk's hands. Now all these things, projectile in flight, motions of clerk's hands, these things, they are under control of an external force. And these are metaphors through which he is trying to refer to the freedom of human beings. Yeah, there is another quotation that gets to my mind time again, that human being is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. everywhere he is in chains. The proximate causes of these movements are internal to the turnspit, the projectile, and the clock at the time of the movement. This cannot be sufficient for moral responsibility. Now, for moral responsibilities, we have talked about it earlier on. Kant believes that human beings need to be totally and totally free. If you want to hold them responsible, you need to make them free, altogether free. Now Kant asks a question in the next slide. I hope you're here. Why not? The reason Kant says is ultimately that the causes of these movements occur in time. The causes of these movements occur in time. Now time is a very, very relevant idea. Time for me is something else, and for you it is something else. So Kant is time and again referring to these abstract ideas because he wants to prove that freedom is the ultimate need for human beings, and not worldly freedom. Remember, not worldly freedom. Worldly freedom for Kant, it comes later than the transcendental freedom or the natural freedom. Okay, return to the theft example once again. A compatibilist would say that the thief's action is free because its proximate cause is inside him. Now, a compatibilist would believe that the thief's action is free because its close cause is within the thief himself, and because the theft was not an involuntary convulsion but a voluntary action. The thief decided to commit the theft, and his action flowed from this decision. According to Kant, however, if the thief's decision is a natural phenomenon that occurs in time, then it must be the effect of some cause that occurred in a previous time. Now Kant wants you to focus on this thing, the effect of some cause. If that thief, he was committing the theft, he says it is because of time, because previously that person must have been wronged by someone, previously that person must have been robbed by someone, previously that person must have been dealt in a wrong way by someone. That is why, just to fulfill the effect, he had to commit that theft. And since that effect of some cause, some, it is an abstract word once again, so that some cause, that can be a cause that is either natural or maybe from other human beings. But even if it is from other human beings, and if we think that this entire world has been controlled by nature, so it becomes a controversial idea. Why? Because if somebody kills me, that's killer of mine, or that person, for example, who has come to my home for theft, they have been sent over here by an external force, whatever that external force is. It is a controversial idea for Kant, and he is basically ridiculing this idea. Now, this is an essential part of Kant's Newtonian worldview and is grounded in the a priori laws. He was basically moved by Newton over here, specifically the category of cause and effect. He says that no action is without a cause. Okay, whenever there is an action, it is the effect of some cause in the previous times. In accordance with which our understanding constructs experience, every event has a cause that begins in an earlier time. If that cause too is an event occurring in time, then it must also have a cause beginning in a still earlier time. Now, this is a chain of signification basically. He says that every action, since it is the effect of some cause, now that cause, when we take it back and it reaches some point where someone, an external force, is responsible for creating that cause, and the rest of those actions, they are basically effects to the causes and that chain of signification of causes. I hope it makes some sense to you. All natural events occur in time and are thoroughly determined by causal chains that stretches backwards into the distant past. So there is no room for freedom in nature. He believes there is no room for freedom in nature, which is deterministic in a strong sense. Deterministic, determination, irada, azam, which is deterministic in a strong sense. Kant believes whatever we do, it has been predetermined. Whatever the actions of human beings are, they are predetermined by an external force. The actions of human beings, they have been controlled from somewhere else. The remote is with someone else. That is what Kant simply wants to tell you. Now, the root of the problem for Kant is time. Again, if the thief's choice to commit the theft is a natural event in time, then it is the effect of a causal chain extending into the distant past. But the past is out of his control now in the present. Once the past is past, he can't change it. On Kant's view, that is why his actions would not be in his control in the present if they are determined by events in the past. Now, if whatever I'm doing right now, if it's been determined by something in the past, I cannot control the present. That means, for Kant, human beings are not necessarily free. Even if he could control those past events in the past, he cannot control them now. But in fact, past events were not in his control in the past either, if they too were determined by events in the more distant past, because eventually the causal antecedents of his actions stretch back before his birth, and obviously events that occurred before his birth were not in his control. So if the thief's choice to commit the theft is a natural event in time, then it is not now and never was in his control, and he could not have done otherwise than to commit the theft. In that case, it would be a mistake to hold him morally responsible for it. So this is the entire story. We have talked about it. Kant's belief is that if somebody is committing something wrong, so this moral philosophy is that this is basically an effect to some cause, and those causes, they are numerous and they reach to the distant past. In fact, they are in the past, where even the person who has committed the theft, he was not even given birth. So if he wasn't given birth, he could not control that past. That means necessarily human beings, they have been inflicted with all these things. We have been given a direction, we have been made to run in a specific direction by some causes from the past, causes which are unknown, causes that cannot be named for Kant, and he is ridiculing this idea of punishment for something that had been intended or determined to happen. Now, compatibilism, as Kant understands it, therefore locates the issue in the wrong place. By the wrong place, we mean to say in the past. Even if the cause of my action is internal to me, if it is in the past, for example, if my action today is determined by a decision I made yesterday or from the character I developed in childhood, then it is not within my control now. The real issue is not what the cause of my action is, internal or external to me, but whether it is in my control now. Now this control, this autonomy, this freedom is basically the point of focus over here for Kant. For Kant, however, the cause of my action can be within my control now only if it is not in time. Now he says that if you want to have freedom, you have to kill this concept of time. There should be no past and there should be no future. All the things that should be conjured into the present. If it is in the present, I can basically get into my yesterdays, and whatever wrong decision I have taken yesterday, I can basically relook at them and can make adjustments over there, can make them right, and then get back to my present, so that my past, my yesterdays, they do not haunt my todays. This is no-brainer. This is no kind of a justification for Kant that you have done something wrong yesterday, that is why you have been given punishment as a result today. So he does not believe in this idea. The real issue is not whether the cause of my action is internal or external to me, but whether it is in my control now. For Kant, however, the cause of my action can be within my control now only if it is not in time. This is why Kant thinks that transcendental idealism is the only way to make sense of the kind of freedom that morality requires. Transcendental idealism. For transcendental idealism allows that the cause of my action may be a thing in itself outside of time, namely my nominal self. My nominal self can be your soul. Your nominal self can be your name written in heavens, which is free because it is not part of nature. because it is not part of nature. Over here he refers to fatalism now. No matter what kind of character I have developed or what external influences act on me, on Kant's view, all of my intentional voluntary actions are immediate effects of my nominal self, which is casually undetermined. Now Kant over here, he takes this idea deeper. He says, even if we imagine that there are two selves or two identities of a man, one is related to his soul, the other one related to his body. Body is under control of someone else. Body is not free, but then there is soul, which is undetermined, which is free. Even then Kant has a problem. What kind of a problem is that? He says, my nominal self is in uncaused cause outside of time. Now once again, the body has no connection with that another identity, another self, nominal self. They too is out of time, outside of time. There doesn't have any idea of time acting upon it, which therefore is not subject to the deterministic laws of nature in accordance with which our understanding constructs experience. Now Kant believes that even if there is that nominal self of mine which is out of time, that has no connection or no linkage with my present, with my body, even then that idea of myself, nominal self being free, is something totally valueless, of no use at all. He is making fun of this idea of freedom. According to Kant, to tell you the entire summary of our lecture, according to Kant, a human being is born free, but everywhere it is in chains, or he or she is in chains. Freedom for Kant is to be taken from nature first, and then freedom of the world should be gained. We have to strive for our freedom from the clutches of nature, and then if we are over here under some control in the world, we can run for our freedom over here too. That is what his entire concept is all about. In our syllabus, the later part of our today's discussion says a brief introduction to idealism. Now idealism is a philosophical movement, is something very, very broad, but I've tried to cover it in one slide, and let's go for it. This is just for your basic understanding, to remember the names, to remember the basic idea of idealism, and if you find time, you can read more on idealism too. This entry discusses philosophical idealism as a movement mainly in the 18th and 19th centuries, although anticipated by certain aspects of 17th century philosophy. Anticipated means designed or predicted by certain aspects of 17th century philosophy. It examines the relationship between epistemological idealism, the view that the contents of human knowledge are ineluctably determined by the structure of human thought. I hope you can see that part in brackets. And ontological idealism. Now two idealisms are there, epistemological and ontological. Now ontological idealism means the view that epistemological idealism delivers truth because the reality itself is a form of thought and human thought participates in it. After discussing precursors, the entry focuses on the 18th century versions of idealism due to Berkeley, Hume and Kant, the 19th century movements of German idealism and subsequently British and American idealism, and then concludes with an examination of the take upon idealism by Moore and Russell. By Moore, we refer to Thomas More, the person who has written Utopia, who was an idealist. And if you have read A Man for All Season, so you would know this name better. And Russell, by Russell we mean to say Bertrand Russell. I hope you people get accustomed to this name fairly soon. So this is a brief introduction of idealism. Idealism is a philosophical movement. It started somewhere in the 17th century. It has its precursors were there. But then what does it do? It has two idealisms, one epistemological idealism and the other one ontological idealism. and then it has its precursors, but the main names over here, they are Berkeley, Hume and Kant. All these people, they had been termed as idealist in the 19th century movements. And then we have German idealism, and subsequently or ultimately we have British and American idealism. And when we talk about British idealism, which is fairly important from the perspective of literature, the one that you'll read over here, so we have to look upon these two names of Thomas More and Russell. I hope this makes some sense to you. If you've got questions, please go to queries and your LMS, post them there, and leave me a message on WhatsApp to get you your replies and answers there. Thank you so very much.